Let me ask you a question. When did America apparently become God's favorite country? Because I must have missed the memo. Like, did heaven send out a group chat? Congrats, USA! You're the official Christian nation. Please collect your complimentary bald eagle, your cross-shaped constitution, and your starter pack of laws nobody actually read. Because last time I checked, Jesus did not sign the Declaration of Independence. And I'm pretty sure the Bible does not contain a section titled, How to Run a Federal Government, the King James Version. But somehow, we've reached this point where people confidently say, America was founded as a Christian nation. And I just want to gently ask, which Christianity are we even talking about? Because that's where it gets real spicy. And if you know me, then you know I love spicy. I'm serious. Are we talking about Catholic Christianity? Baptist Christianity? Evangelical Christianity? Church I only go to on Christmas, but I vote like I'm on the elder board Christianity? Because once the government picks just one, then congratulations. Everyone else just became the wrong kind of Christian. It's like Christianity with a patch notes update. Christianity, Live Service Edition. Every election cycle. All right, folks, we've nerfed compassion, buffed outrage, and added a brand new feature called If I Don't Like You, then it's in the Bible somewhere. But here's the thing, because I want to be crystal clear right out of the gate. This episode is not Christianity bad. This episode is Christian nationalism bad. Those are two very different animals. Christianity is a religion. Christian nationalism is a political ideology wearing a cross like a name badge. One is about belief, while the other is about control. One asks, what do you believe? While the other asks, are you one of us? And look, I get why this topic makes some people nervous. Because as soon as you say, hey, maybe the government shouldn't pick a religion, someone inevitably hears, you must hate God and want to ban Christmas, which is fucking wild. Because the government not picking a religion is literally the thing that lets everyone practice freely, including the Christians. But we'll get to that. Today, I'm going to do three things. Slowly, clearly, and with jokes so nobody rage quits the episode. One, I'm going to explain what Christian nationalism actually is. Two, debunk the idea that America is a Christian nation. And three, explain why mixing religion and government turns faith into a weapon instead of a belief. No yelling, no dunking on your grandma, and no gotcha clips. Just facts, logic, and a little comedy so the medicine goes down. So whether you're a Christian, not Christian, ex-Christian, or just here thinking, I clicked play because Nate said this one might get him canceled, then welcome. Let's talk about why Christian nationalism is the ugly evil twin of Christianity, and why the founders looked at that exact idea and went, yeah, let's not do that. Hey, and welcome to, or welcome back to, the Average Joe Nerdcast. I'm Nate, your resident Average Joe. I'm not a pastor, and I'm not a politician. I'm just the guy who reads the manual before pressing buttons. And notice we've been skipping a few very important pages here lately. And today we're opening that menu. Because somewhere along the way, a really weird idea took root. This idea that questioning Christian nationalism somehow means you're attacking Christianity itself. And that's not how that works. That's like saying, if I criticize mushrooms on pizza, then I hate Italy. No, I just have boundaries. So let me set expectations right now so nobody listens to this episode in bad faith and then gets mad at a version of me that does not exist. This episode is not Christians bad, religion dumb, everyone should believe exactly what I believe. That's not the show. And that's not me. And frankly, that's kind of fucking boring. This episode is about what Christian nationalism actually is, why it's not the same thing as Christianity, and why the founders very intentionally built a system that keeps religion and government from merging into one big angry megazord. And we're going to do it in the Average Joe Nerdcast way. Which means no screaming, no straw men, no pretending history is a vibe instead of a record. We're going to walk through this slowly, clearly, and in a way that a 12-year-old could follow without asking, wait, so why are they yelling? Because here's the thing. If your idea only works when people are confused, then it's probably not a great idea. We're going to talk about what the Constitution actually says. Why America has Christians is not the same as America is a Christian government, and how Christian nationalism ends up hurting the very faith it claims to protect. No law school jargon, no sermon voice, just receipts, logic, and the occasional joke to keep us sane. And if at any point during this episode you feel that little internal reaction like, okay, I don't love this, but I can't actually point to what's wrong yet. Good. That means we're doing it right. So grab yourself a drink and settle in. How about we talk about why Christian nationalism is the ugly evil twin of Christianity, and why the United States was never meant to be God's HOA. Now, before we can debunk anything, before we can even talk history, before we even say the word Constitution without people glazing over, we have to do the most important thing first. We have to define the monster. Because right now, Christian nationalism is one of those phrases people hear and immediately replace with whatever they're already mad about. And that's how confusion wins. So let's slow it all the way down. Christian nationalism is not Christians voting, Christians talking about their faith, Christians praying in public, Christians existing loudly. None of that is the issue. If that were the issue, this episode would be about, wow, people sure are religious sometimes. And that's not exactly breaking news. Christian nationalism is also not believing God has a plan, believing America has problems, believing society has gone off the rails. You can believe all of that and still not be a Christian nationalist. So if someone tells you, they're attacking Christianity. No, they're attacking something using Christianity. And there's a big difference. So here's the simplest, cleanest definition you will ever hear. Christian nationalism is the belief that America should be a Christian nation, that the government should favor Christianity, and that being a real American is tied to being Christian. That's it. No fancy words, no spin, and notice what just happened there. It didn't say people should be free to believe. It said the country should belong to a specific religious identity. That's the pivot. Christian nationalism almost never announces itself honestly. Nobody walks up and says, hello, I'd like to merge church and state and make some citizens second class. They dress it up. They say things like, we're just returning to our roots. We're defending traditional values. We're putting God back in America. And if you don't like this, then you must hate Christianity. That last one is doing a lot of heavy lifting because it turns disagreement into blasphemy. And that's how you shut down conversation without winning an argument. And here's the moment where Christianity and Christian nationalism split into two very different paths. Christianity says, follow this because you believe it. Christian nationalism says, follow this because we're in charge. Christianity works on conscience. Christian nationalism works on compliance. One is voluntary, while the other is enforced. And the second you need the government to enforce belief, then you're no longer talking about faith. You're talking about control. And some people hear this and go, okay, but isn't this just word games? No, because words determine rules. If America is a Christian nation, then which Christianity? Whose interpretation? Who decides when someone isn't Christian enough? Because history has an answer for that question. And the answer is the people in power. And shockingly, they are always the most righteous group. Every time. No exceptions. Totally trustworthy. Yeah, okay. Let's do a quick thought experiment. Imagine tomorrow the government says, America is officially Christian. Cool. Next question. Is it Catholic, Baptist, Evangelical, Orthodox, non-denominational, but somehow still very specific? Because the moment the government answers that question, millions of Christians are now suddenly the wrong kind of Christian. And if you think Christian nationalism protects Christianity, then you haven't thought through step 2. Now, here's where we don't dunk on people. Christian nationalism feels comforting to some folks because it promises order, familiarity, moral clarity. Someone's in charge again. In chaotic times, that's really appealing. But appealing doesn't mean correct. And comforting doesn't mean constitutional. It just means human. And here's how you can always spot Christian nationalism. If the argument ever shifts from, I believe this, to, this country belongs to people just like me, then you've crossed the line. Faith doesn't need a border patrol. So before we move forward, let's lock this in. Christianity is a religion. Christian nationalism is a political ideology. Christianity asks for belief. Christian nationalism demands dominance. And the reason this matters, the reason we're doing this episode at all, is because the founders saw this exact combination coming and immediately went, yeah, we should probably write some rules against this. And this is usually where someone says, okay, Nate, but let's be so for real. The founding fathers were Christians. They believed in God. So obviously, America is a Christian nation. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. But history is one of those things that only works if you slow down. So that's exactly what we're going to do. No vibes, no Facebook memes, no flag-based theology. Just what actually happened. The first thing people get wrong, the founding fathers were not one thing. They weren't a single belief system. They weren't all the same kind of Christian. Some of them weren't really Christian at all in the modern sense. You had traditional Christians, deists who believed in God but rejected organized religion, thinkers who believed religion was valuable but dangerous when tied to power. So when someone says the founders were Christian, the correct response is not anger. It's just, which ones and which Christianity? Because that question mattered deeply to them. And to understand why the founders built the system the way that they did, then you have to understand what they were reacting against. Europe had spent centuries doing the whole state religion, religious wars, persecution, believe this or else routine. Religion wasn't just faith. It was a government weapon. And the founders looked at that history and went, okay, what if the government just stays out of belief entirely? Because power corrupts religion the same exact way it corrupts politics. And this was not an accident, because here's the part Christian nationalism needs you to miss. The Constitution does not accidentally leave Christianity out. They didn't forget to mention Jesus. They didn't run out of space. They didn't say, we'll add God in a patch later. They chose not to establish a national religion. That omission is intentional. And when something defining is left out of a document that sets up an entire government, that silence matters. And for anyone who just said, but they talked about God all the time, Nate. Yes, they did. And here's the distinction that matters. The founders were fine with personal belief. They were not fine with government authority over belief. They talked about God in letters, in speeches, and in personal writings. But when it came time to write the rules of power, nothing. No Jesus clause, no Bible authority, no by divine right. Because the second the government backs religion, then religion stops being faith and starts being policy. Now, here's a fact that absolutely wrecks the whole Christian nation argument. The Constitution explicitly says you do not have to be religious to hold office. Not Christian, not anything. Think about how radical that was in the 1700s. At a time when kings ruled by divine right, America said, belief does not determine your right to govern. That means from day one, the system allowed non-Christians, religious minorities, hell, even non-believers, to fully participate in government. If America were meant to be a Christian nation, that clause makes no sense. Now, this is where someone usually jumps in like they just found a cheat code. It literally says in the year of our Lord in the Constitution. Boom! Christian nation. Yes, that phrase exists. And no, it does not mean what people want it to mean. That line is not theology. It's not doctrine. It's not a mission statement. It's just a timestamp. In the year of our Lord was standard dating language in the 18th century, the same way we say 2026 today. Nobody was declaring Jesus the Secretary of State. They were just saying, cool, everyone agrees what year it is. Let's move on. So here's a quick logic test. If that phrase were meant to establish Christianity as the foundation of the government, then why is God never mentioned anywhere else in the governing text? No authority from God, no Christian doctrine, no biblical law. Nothing. In the parts that actually grant power. If the strongest evidence for a Christian nation is a line in the date, that's just desperation. And here's the irony that no one likes to talk about. Keeping religion out of government is one of the main reasons religion has thrived in America. There's no state church, no forced attendance, no government-approved theology. Faith had to be chosen, not enforced. And that's not anti-Christian. That's just faith on hard mode. So let's put this to bed. The founders believed in religious freedom, feared religious control, and deliberately built a government that belonged to no religion at all. Not because they hated faith, but because they understood what happens when faith gets drunk on power. Christian nationalism isn't a return to the founders' vision. It's the exact thing they were trying to prevent. So at this point in the episode, I feel like I've established something pretty clearly. The United States was not founded as a Christian government. The rules don't say that, the structure doesn't allow that, and the founders intentionally avoided that. So the obvious next question is, okay, Nate, then why does half the country think it was? This belief didn't come out of nowhere. People didn't all of a sudden wake up one morning and collectively misread the Constitution. This myth survives because it feeds on a few very powerful, very human instincts. So let's break those down. Reason number one, Christian got confused with American. For most of U.S. history, the majority of Americans have been Christian, and that's just demographics. And over time, that fact slowly morphed into an assumption. If most Americans were Christian, then America itself must be Christian. But that's not how governments work. That's almost like saying most people who play Fortnite are teenagers. Therefore, Fortnite is legally a teen government. No, that's just who shows up. Culture does not equal constitution. But once those two ideas blur together long enough, they start to feel interchangeable. And feelings are doing a lot of work in this myth. Reason number 2. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Christian nationalism leans hard on nostalgia. You'll hear phrases like, back when America had values, when God was respected, before everything went crazy. And notice what's missing from that story. Specific dates, specific policies, specific laws. It's all just vibes. A fuzzy memory of a time that felt simpler, even if it actually wasn't. Because here's an uncomfortable truth. When people say America used to be more Christian, what they often mean is, America used to feel more familiar to me. That's not a moral argument. That's a comfort argument. Reason number 3. Fear makes people want rules. I mean, seriously, let's be real. The world does feel chaotic right now. Technology moves super fast. Culture shifts even faster. People disagree very loudly. And in times of uncertainty, humans crave order, clarity, and authority. Christian nationalism offers a simple promise. If we just put God back in charge, then everything will make sense again. And that's comforting. But comforting ideas aren't always the correct ones. Sometimes they're just the easiest ones. Reason number 4. Identity politics, but with a halo. And here's where things get spicy. Christian nationalism turns Christianity from a belief into an identity badge. It stops being about how you live, what you practice, or what you believe, and starts being about who's in, who's out, and who belongs. And it answers the question, who are we? And in doing so, it quietly creates a list of people who are not us. And that's powerful and dangerous. Because when religion becomes a political identity, disagreement becomes betrayal. Reason number 5. It sounds patriotic. And that's the point. Christian nationalism rarely presents itself as religious extremism. It wraps itself in flags, military language, saving the country rhetoric. It doesn't say, we want religious control. It says, we love America. And criticizing it gets framed as hating your country. That's a rhetorical trap, because now you're not debating ideas. You're defending your loyalty. And once loyalty replaces logic, facts stop mattering. And here's the sneakiest part of them all, the one that's really keeping this myth alive. Christian nationalism positions itself as defensive, not aggressive. It says, we're just protecting our way of life. But protecting something that was never legally yours to begin with? Well, that's just control with better public relations. And this idea sticks because it does 3 things at once. It explains discomfort, it assigns blame, and it offers a simple fix. And simple fixes, my friends, they are addictive, especially when the real world is complicated. But the Constitution was built for complexity. Pluralism was not a bug, it was the feature. So before we move on, let's lock this in. People believe America is a Christian nation not because history says it is, but because identity, nostalgia, and fear make it feel true. Christian nationalism isn't history remembered. It's history reimagined to solve modern anxieties. And that's why it keeps coming back. And at this point, someone usually says, okay, I get it. The founders didn't want a Christian government. But Nate, what's the harm? And that's the right question. Because if Christian nationalism were just people being extra churchy, putting crosses on stuff, and praying before meetings, we wouldn't be here. This matters because we know what happens when governments try to enforce religion. We really don't have to guess. We have all the receipts. And history has been screaming the same exact lesson for literal centuries. The very first problem shows up almost immediately. If the government says America is a Christian nation, then the government has to answer a follow-up question. Which Christianity? And there is no neutral answer to that question. Because the moment the state defines real Christianity, it also defines fake Christianity, wrong Christianity, dangerous Christianity. And suddenly, belief becomes something you can fail. And this is where it always goes wrong. Once the government picks a version of Christianity, it starts doing three things: rewarding the approved version, pressuring everyone else to conform, and punishing people who don't. And none of that looks like faith. It looks like compliance. But Nate, it would never go that far. Cool. History would like to have a quick word with you. Because this has been tried. A lot. And every single time it follows the same exact story arc. We're just recognizing God. We're protecting Christian values. Why are these people causing problems? Maybe they shouldn't have so much freedom. And once freedom becomes conditional, then it stops being freedom. And it doesn't just hurt non-Christians. It hurts Christians too. Because when the government gets involved, faith becomes political, transactional, and performative. You don't believe because you're convicted. You believe because it's expected of you. That's how you get hollow faith, public piety with private rot, religion as branding. It looks strong, but it's actually incredibly brittle. And Christian nationalism quietly creates a hierarchy of citizenship. At the very top, real Americans. Everyone else, technically allowed. And once belief becomes part of national identity, disagreement becomes disloyalty. And that's not unity. That's a loyalty test. And this is the part people really don't like hearing. Christian nationalism pairs moral certainty with state power. And that combo is incredibly dangerous. Because when leaders believe God is on our side, then compromise becomes sin, opposition becomes evil, and accountability becomes optional. And that's not Christianity. That's authoritarianism with religious aesthetics. So let's have a quick reality check. Just stay with me. Ask yourself this: if Christianity truly needed government power to survive, why did it spread for centuries without it? Why did it grow most where belief was voluntary? Why does forced religion always produce weaker faith? Because belief coerced is not belief, it's compliance. And this is exactly why the founders did what they did. They weren't anti-God or anti-religion or anti-Christianity. They were anti-religious coercion. They knew that once religion and government fuse, government loses legitimacy, religion loses credibility, and the people, they lose freedom. So they separated the two, not to weaken anything, but to protect them. So let's lock this in. Christian nationalism doesn't protect Christianity. It politicizes it. It doesn't strengthen faith. It hollows it out. And it doesn't unite the country. It divides it into the approved and the suspect. And that's why the founders built guardrails. And not because religion is inherently dangerous, but because power is. All right, everyone, let's exhale for a minute and clean up the biggest mix-up at the center of all of this. Christian nationalism survives by blurring the line between two ideas, religious freedom and religious control. And they sound close, but they are not even remotely the same thing. So let's define them like we're explaining it to someone who just asked, wait a minute, aren't those basically the same? Religious freedom means you can believe what you want. You can practice how you want. You can worship or not worship freely. And the government stays out of it. No favoritism, no punishment, no approved belief system. Your faith, or lack thereof, is your business and yours alone. The government's job is to protect that space. And that's it. Religious control, on the other hand, looks like this. One religion gets special treatment. One belief system gets political power. Laws start reflecting theology. Citizenship starts feeling conditional. It says, you're free, as long as you believe the right thing. And that's not freedom. That's probation. A lot of people genuinely think they are defending religious freedom when they're actually arguing for religious control, because they've been taught this equation. If my religion doesn't get special treatment, then it's being attacked. But that's not how freedom works. Freedom isn't my beliefs win. Freedom is my beliefs don't need permission. And there's a big damn difference. So here's a test that clears this up immediately. Ask yourself one question. Would I be okay with this rule if it were enforced by a religion that I don't believe in? And if the answer is no, congratulations. You don't want religious freedom. You want your religion in charge. And that's human, but it's not constitutional. The founders understood something deeply uncomfortable. The moment the government can favor one religion, then it can suppress any religion, including yours. So instead of asking, which religion should rule, they instead asked, how do we make sure none of them do? And that wasn't hostility. That was wisdom. You'll hear this phrase a lot. We just want to put God back in the government. And here's the honest response. God was never in the government. People were. Believers were. Churches were. But the government itself, it was designed to stay neutral on belief, on purpose. Because once God becomes a political position, then someone has to decide what God says, who speaks for him, and who's doing it all wrong. And history shows us exactly who ends up holding that microphone. And this is the part I really want people of faith to hear. Religious freedom protects sincere belief. Religious control rewards performative belief. Freedom produces conviction. Control produces compliance. And compliance looks like faith until it's tested. Christianity doesn't need the government to survive. If it did, that would say a lot more about the faith than about the country. Faith that's real doesn't need a law behind it. It just needs people who actually believe it. So here's the clean takeaway. Religious freedom says believe freely. Religious control says believe correctly. And America chose the first one. Christian nationalism is pushing for the second. And once you see that difference, you really can't unsee it. All right, if you've stuck with me this far, seriously, thank you. Because like a lot of these conversations, They only work if we slow down long enough to actually understand what's being argued, instead of just reacting to how it feels. So, how about we land this plane cleanly? Here's what we've established in this episode, plainly, calmly, and without buzzwords. America was not founded as a Christian government. And that's not an insult. That's not revisionist history. And that's not anti-faith. That's just what the framework says. The founders believed in religious freedom. They feared religious control. And they deliberately kept government neutral on belief. Not because religion was inherently bad, but because coercion is. So for one last time, Christianity is a faith. Christian nationalism is a political ideology that uses that faith as a shortcut to power. Christianity asks for belief. Christian nationalism demands dominance. Christianity works on conscience. Christian nationalism works on compliance. And once you see that difference, it becomes impossible to pretend they're the same thing. And I want to be very clear right now. Defending the separation of church and state is not anti-Christian. It's one of the reasons Christianity survived and has thrived in America at all. Because faith that's chosen freely is so much stronger than faith that's enforced. If belief needs the government to prop it up, that's not a win for religion. That's a huge red flag. And this is the line Christian nationalism crosses. When an argument shifts from, I believe this, to, this country belongs to people just like me. That's not faith anymore. That's ownership. And the founders rejected that idea outright. They built a country where belief is protected, but never weaponized. This is not some dusty history debate. It matters because when religion becomes a political identity, disagreements become disloyalty, compromise becomes sin, and power stops being held accountable. And history is painfully clear about where that road leads. Every single time. And if you need a simple way to explain this, here it is. America protects religion by not picking one. Christianity thrives best when it isn't enforced, and Christian nationalism breaks both. That's it. No yelling required. The American experiment wasn't, let's build a country for just one belief. It was, let's build a country where belief doesn't need permission. And that idea is bigger than any one religion, and strong enough to protect all of them. Christian nationalism isn't a return to our roots. It's a misunderstanding of them. And once you separate faith from power, then both get so much healthier. And that's it. If you made it to the end of this one, seriously, thank you. These conversations only work because you're willing to hang out with me through them. And if this episode helped you put words to something you've been feeling, then share it with someone. Not to win any kind of arguments, but to start a better conversation. As always, shout out to my player 2, and shout out to everyone behind the scenes. You know who you are. And shout out to all of you for hanging out with me. If you want to keep this conversation going, the lobby is always open. Come join the private Facebook group. Drop your thoughts, hang out with us, play some silly games, and let's actually talk this stuff out like real adults. I'll post the link to the group in the show notes, or you can head right over to Facebook and in the search bar, just search Average Joe Nerdcast the Lobby, and you will find the page. Until next time, stay gold, nerd bold, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Game over.